Hello, I'm
No.
Radek. No?
All right, you're Radek, whatever.
Hello, I'm Radek,
I'm Michael,
and this is the podcast.
a sounding board for interesting ideas and insights. We discuss books we read and want to share with you.
As well as technology and productivity, which is what we do by day working on our app, Nozbe.
Or whatever else comes to mind.
And those of you who are watching this on YouTube probably see how both of our faces are totally red because we're trying to make the intro for the fifth time or something.
Yeah, and this is the intro we've been doing for the last 140 something episodes, and I made a mistake. Damn.
Yeah.
Well, whatever.
That happens actually quite a lot.
Yeah, but then again, we know it by heart. Well, we should change the intro to something else, and then we'll make more mistakes.
Yeah, we should switch it up. It's like a lot of podcasts, you know, they never change their intro, and you sort of get used to it. Like you listen to a podcast for 50,
Yeah.
100, 200 episodes, and it always goes like this. But when you start thinking about it, it's like, wow, the intro is sort of old, and it could be much better, and it no longer represents fully what the show is about. So
Yeah,
maybe
but-
we should break the habit of podcasters and make something new.
Yeah. Well, we already spiced it up on YouTube because we have this cheesy drone effects and things.
So bad.
Yeah.
So bad.
It was so much fun, droning. It was so much fun, navigating the
Yeah,
drone.
it
anyway.
was fun droning, but it doesn't look that good.
Yeah, I'm
doesn't
not a
look that
professional
professional.
droner yet, but I'm getting there.
Yeah, I mean, you spend $1,000 on that drone, so you know you're serious.
Exactly. I'm a serious droner. All right.
All right, let's not keep droning about this. Let's go talk about productivity.
Yep. So we haven't been discussing productivity for a while. No, we have, but we have updates, right?
Yeah, so I think 5 episodes ago, I think 139,
Yep.
First Tasks First, when we were both live in Gdynia, we talked about my best yet system for planning your day and your week to optimize for deep work, for squeezing as much productivity as is possible. And I have two things to add to that I two new ideas to add to that. One is related to iPad only, so you'll be happy about that, Michael. But let's keep you waiting and first talk about
Cliffhangers, man.
how to overcome. Maybe overcome is a strong word, but how I got better at dealing with really hard projects, really hard tasks.
Okay.
So that was still is, but that was the biggest challenge with my system, that it optimizes for sort of better flow. It optimizes for sort of my psychology and how to and my energy levels throughout the day, throughout the week. But there's a category of tasks, of things to do, which are really, really, really hard. Those are usually, and those are almost always, to some extent, have to do with research, right? Like,
Yeah.
because that's the whole point. If I know what to achieve, like how to achieve it, then it's just a matter of implementation details, right? But maybe there's some challenges along the way, but I essentially know what the point is. But there are some things that we're working on in our secret project that I've been procrastinating on for months because they're really hard to figure out. And
Yeah, I get it.
those are things like,
No, sorry. I just can say that I can see that because when I'm going through the comments in the tasks in this project, I can see I haven't gotten around to it yet, and I haven't gotten around to it yet. Like I see this comment in a few tasks, and I'm like, oh, okay, I see that this is a big one.
yeah, thankfully you don't watch closely enough to see the due date changing every week. From the next week, from this week to the next week to the next week, right? But some things are like that, where I know more or less what I want to achieve, but I don't know how to achieve it yet, and that has to do with the fact that there's a lot of different constraints that need to all be satisfied in order for this to work, right? There's a ton of stuff that has to work in a very specific way, and it's like I'm staring at a blank page, right? I'm trying to figure it out conceptually how it needs to work to achieve what I want to achieve, and I can't do it. Like I can't. Like it takes me being at my 100% level and finding a whole day of focus to destroy a problem like that. And so inevitably that doesn't go very fast, and most frustratingly, it doesn't go very smoothly, right? I can't predict how it will go. I can't plan for it very well. I can't put it on a schedule, and when I know that other things depend on it, like this needs to be done before other things can be done, I can't plan it for it very well, and so that was the challenge, and I think I haven't figured it out completely, but I've started making over the last few weeks a much better progress on some of these tasks, these projects really, just by changing my mindset about them. So what I try to do is to just figure them out, to take a piece of paper. I have my iPad, right? A virtual piece of paper, right? And sketch things out, like sketch out all of the ways conceptually how it needs to work to satisfy all of the criteria, all of the constraints it needs to satisfy, right? And again, either I would schedule it for one day, and it would be agony. Like it would be agonizing because I would try and I would not be able to figure out. I would just be spinning at and getting hot out of frustration, but I couldn't do it. And I would try and fail to get the details right. And that often is a sort of downward spiral, because when I am in a state like this, either I try to push through it. Well, I will try to push through it, but then I will give up at some point, and then it's very likely that I will go do things that are not very good. Like I will, instead of getting my backup task, like do something else, or just try even harder. I would get distracted. I would do shallower. I would do other stuff just to alleviate the agony, right?
Yeah.
Or I would see that in advance, that this is not the day, this is not the week, and I would procrastinate on it very almost deliberately, and put it off to the next week and the next week and the next week, and then a few months pass by, and it's like, why is this still not done, right? Because I would be searching for this perfect opportunity, because there are days and weeks like this when you feel superhuman, and you can tackle problems that normally you can't, right? But that's a very frustrating strategy, and that didn't work very well. And I realized, like, what started helping me overcome this procrastination is just that I realized it's stupid. It's the wrong approach. Like, I've been going about this in the mindset that we have to get this right? Like, when we ship these things I'm working on, they have to be right on the first go, because we can't ship it broken in some subtle, hard to analyze ways, because if we ship it broken, it will be very hard to change it in the future. We must ship it right. So I extrapolated from it with the approach that I internally, as I'm working on it, I have to get it right in one go. And so I first have to design it and like figure out all of the problems that need to be tackled, like conceptual problems, before I can get about implementing it. But this is stupid. Like, this is not how we do things in other contexts. Like, this is how traditional projects, traditional software was developed. First, you go through the whole conceptual phase, then you go through the totality of the design phase, then the totality of the implementation phase, and then the totality of the testing phase, and then it's shipped. And no one does this anymore. Like,
Nope.
I recently read an article where some US general working with nuclear related stuff was saying how this is a broken approach. Like, the most conservative possible people see that it doesn't work, right? And we don't do this in general, but I try to apply this approach to this problem. That's stupid. It's sort of the analogy that I figure out what was very apt is as if I was working on this masterpiece, right? And I stared at a blank canvas, and I would keep staring at it because I couldn't figure out some details, right? And I would procrastinate on it, and it would be agonizing because I couldn't figure out how to paint something just right. And of course, that's not how you do things. Like you would, I mean, I don't know anything about painting, but conceptually, you'd start by sketching out some basic shapes, then start drawing some of them, and then you'd realize some of that is wrong, and you'd paint over it, and you'd change some things and paint again, and then you would add detail here and there, and maybe redo some things because they weren't quite right, until you're left with the masterpiece. But it would be very difficult to just do it in one go, right?
Yeah, I had
like from start to finish with the perfect picture in your mind.
So I heard this good analogy from our fellow podcasters, Marco Arment and David Smith. They have this small podcast, Under the Radar, about independent iOS development. And they always say that they start with code already when they have an idea. And this code, it's going to be ugly in the very beginning, but it's fine because they want to see if they get something working. And only then they start improving the code and all this stuff, because they want to see if they solve a problem, and then they start making the problem look, then they start adding classes and procedures and all this stuff that has to be done so that the code is nice. But the nice code is not an objective in the beginning, because the objective in the beginning is to solve the problem, right? And this is what you're saying, that you should start from just the basic concept and then work upwards from there. And in my case, for example, what I do when I'm writing, and I have to write, and especially when I have a writer's block, and I want to write, and I need to write an article because I promised, to iMagazine or to our blog or to whatever. So what I do is I open a mind map and I just start putting things, like putting first words. And I know that in mind map, especially on an iPad, the notes can be switched, so the structure doesn't matter. I just put ideas. And then I start organizing the ideas a little bit later. But first I put just the ideas without any stress of if it makes sense, if it's coherent or not, just the ideas. And this gives me this liberty to start instead of sweating over this beautiful article I'm going to write.
Yeah. That last part is a good analogy that you said, that you don't care if everything is coherent, because that was my problem. That, like, this seems sort of obvious, but I only realized or rediscovered this now because in the vast majority of my work, this is not the case. Now, it's not that the first picture I paint in code is perfect, but it's imperfect in different ways. Okay, so sometimes I build something that lacks features.
Right.
Okay, I built something that is broken in very sort of obvious, concrete ways. Or I built something that's ugly, that's functional, but either me or someone else will pick up where I left off and finish the work. Or I built something that's functional, but the code is a bit ugly. Like it's not quite right. Like I know I can refactor it because it will cause us trouble in the long term, but functionally it's just right. Right, and here's a different kind of problem, because it's not a problem of code quality or of ugliness or of completion, but it's a problem of these little conceptual issues that in general it looks sort of right, but then you start thinking about these really weird dependencies that seem like they don't matter. But in this situation where this happens and then this and this, it will break, right? And that's very difficult to analyze. That's very difficult to reason about. And most most problems are not as difficult as these that I'm working on. So that usually doesn't come up. Like it's something, conceptual issues like this will be noticed and solved like in less than a day. Like I just work on it, I work through it, and when I push it internally, that conceptual issues are done, right? But here's the thing. Like, first of all, it's not shipping. Like, even though it's very difficult to it's very uncomfortable feeling that I feel like I can't put it in code because it's broken. It ain't right in these very important but subtle ways. But customers won't see it yet, so that's okay. I know that it's broken. I have tasks for it, so that's okay. And I'm not yet finished, so I can keep working on it. And then like one of the issues that are a mistake, but something that I had in my mind is that those are sort of tricky problems. So if I get it wrong, I will have to rework this, right? I will have to rewrite it a couple of times, right? So it's easier to figure out this problem in totality and then implement it so that I don't have to work through it many times. And that's nice when it works. Like in most cases that are much simpler, that is true. But in that case, it's clearly not, because like how can I argue that it will be easier if I get it right on the first try if I'm procrastinating on months? And so it takes longer, both in like calendar time that it pushes, but it also in like wall clock time, because every time I try to tackle it, my productivity gets destroyed and I don't accomplish nothing, right? So obviously the right thing to do, an obvious thing to do, but not really until now, is, well, to make a first ugly draft. Make something that's broken, that I know is broken.
Yeah.
It's very broken.
Make a conscious decision that's it's going to be broken.
Yeah. Like, hey guys, I just built something. It's broken, right?
Yeah.
Can you please merge? And but then the interesting thing about it is that it's like painting. If you try to paint in your head until you touch until you touch the canvas with your brush, it's going to be agonizing, because your mind is not a good medium to paint on, right?
No.
And same with me. I'm trying to figure out conceptual issues related to code, but it's much easier to see them when they're in code. So I start painting in the medium that I'm supposed to paint in, right? And I'm building something that's broken. But the more is done, the more is clear, like the map, the domain of problems and constraints becomes less fuzzy, becomes more crisp, because I see the parts that work and I see the parts that don't work, and they're very concrete. They're not just in my mind. I see them sketched out in code, right? And the more I have in code, the more I see how different sort of conceptual sort of sub problems, different ways of solving them are more clear, because I already know what I know and what I don't know. And when it's just on paper, everything is sort of fuzzy and unconcrete, right? And so the more is done, the fewer constraints remain unresolved, and it's easier to iterate my way to perfection in the end, one broken iteration at a time. And one also interesting thing is that part of the reason why those problems are very difficult to solve is that there are conceptual issues not just with code, but with the design itself. Like, we know more or less what we're trying to achieve, but there's these few issues that impact it that we don't yet have the answer to. And now, so by procrastinating on it, I do something bad for the whole process, not just for me, for the code, but for the whole process and for the whole team. Because when I put out a first ugly, dirty, wrong, broken implementation, you can look at it. The whole design team can look at it, can play with it, can tap on it, and just scroll through it. And it's broken, and you know that it's broken, but there's some things that are already there. And the more concrete, tangible it is, compared to just the design, which was prose and mock-ups, the easier it is to figure out if our design works, and it's easier to figure out the few last sort of the T's uncrossed and the I's undotted, it's easier to see which way we should go. The more concrete prototype we have.
Yeah, and I have a very good example for this last week. So we have just to give us an analogy from a different thing than coding for our people who are not coders. So in Poland, we published this book, 10 Steps to Ultimate Productivity, in Polish. And we are right now preparing a first revision. So it's like second edition of this book. But also we are preparing an edition for the US market, so in English. And we decided that, let's take this opportunity to maybe make the book better. Like, how it looks like internally, how it's formatted. It's already nicely formatted and whatever. But we are thinking of changing the format and whatever. So we are changing the format and thinking about it. And I was thinking, I was procrastinating on this task of how it should look like and, and how it should be done. Again, a big task to go through the whole book and see how this can be better, how it can be like a more of a worksheet than just a book, right? So to encourage people to study productivity more. Mm-hmm. And first step I did is I got myself a pile of books, like this pile that you see behind me and here. So like the pile of books. And I said, okay, this is my constraint. I'm going to study these books because they are completely different books from completely different authors and see how they are done, and jot down and take pictures of the most interesting things, like outlines or whatever, like interesting ideas from these books, like how they are structured. So that was my first step. Second step was I took the book, my book, and started just going through the introduction and the first chapter and changing things. Just right there, I actually have the PDF version of it on my iPad Pro, and I was using Apple Pencil. So just and I had the PDF, and I was just drawing on the PDF, changing things. And the best part, what you just said, is that I thought already that after studying these books, I had an idea how this could be different. But after I did 2 chapters, I realized, there is another idea. Mm-hmm. I can change this and this and this. So I had to get back to introduction and the first chapters to add this additional idea and change it differently. But I wouldn't have come up with this idea if I wouldn't have done already the first 2 chapters. Like it's the chicken and egg problem. Like if I wouldn't start working on this, I wouldn't have come up with this additional idea. So in the end, because I fell into this flow, because I forced myself to do it, in 2.5 hours, I did the whole book. And I completely changed, the outline and the outlook of the book, the how it looks like and everything. But as you said, when you have the first version, the first changes, then from that you get the feedback loop. You get the feedback what can be done differently, and then you change again, and then you change again, and then in the end. And what I sent to the team is not the final version, of course, because then Magda and Hubert, I'm sure they will have their ideas based on what I did, and then based on that, we will have the final beautiful version, new version of the book. But as you said, if I wouldn't do the first part, I would do a disservice to the rest of the team. Now the rest of the team can benefit from my work, even though it's not perfect and it's not production ready yet.
Yeah, it's true. Now I want to stress that what I'm talking about is not always true. Like, it's not always a good idea to work on problems iteratively, because that constrains you to the local maximum, right? You have something that's not quite good yet, and you push it over like until a peak where you see this is good.
Right.
But oftentimes like this is wrong. You have to think outside of the box, right? Like the box is a useful thing. When you have a box, that there's not a lot, that there's only small surface area. I can figure out what's the best thing in that box, but sometimes this is wrong. This is not it, and you can reach a local maximum through iteration. But sometimes you have to like just completely crush like what you have, and you start from scratch, look outside, like figure out something completely different. And so the iterative approach on like building a first draft and improving it is not always going to work. And and either you'll be stuck in the local maximum because you won't see a much better solution, or even if you will see it, you'll fall into the sunk cost fallacy that you spend so much time on it already that you know, starting from scratch is too much. So sometimes it is worth like investing like purely time in like purely conceptual or design work to find something much better completely, like something completely different, and then iterate on that. But in that case, that work is already done. We've already gone outside the box to figure out the big new thing, and now I already have a box that I can draw, and I can start iterating and find the local maximum in that box. But I just wanted to point it out that not always iteration is the right approach.
But how do you distinguish that?
Well, man, that's a really good question. I guess it's helpful if you have a bullshit detector and if you look outside just your work, if you look at, you know, depending on your domain, at say other companies, other products, other books, other whatever, movies, whatever it is that you're making, and notice when people start doing interesting things that you'd never think of, then that can be a wake-up call. And when you have signals to suggest to you that, you know, when you have the bullshit detector to use whatever for example, use your product and see that it's broken in some fundamental way, then that's a good signal. Then that you have to just think divergently and like go in, you know, 10 different directions to find something better. That's the best thing I can think of right now.
Yeah, for me, very often it's giving this, it's doing the iterative part first, but as you said, doing some research on also as you know to go somewhere else, but also it's to send it to somebody who's not involved in this. To try to find somebody who has an expertise to tell you, to give you feedback, but is not involved with this so much. It doesn't have, you know, his stake in this or her stake in this. This way, I get a feedback. I get a piece of feedback from somebody who's a little bit, you know, far away from my problem. So he or she might find, as you said, the way outside of the box. Saying, but did you think about the other thing which can do? Right? So like, they can give you that. So for me, this, you know, asking for feedback, somebody unexpected, somebody different is sometimes helpful.
Yeah, that's a really good point. You know, talking to other people, I wouldn't think of that.
Yeah.
No, but one more thing I wanted to mention to my problem and my sort of mindset progress on it, which is quite specific to programming, but I think I have an analogy that might be more general, is that something that there's one of the, in my opinion, the biggest differences between average and really good programmers is in that, you know, a good code, you know, a decent programmer will make something that's functional and that's relatively bug-free, right? Mm-hmm. But a really good code is one that's not just functional and bug-free, but it's easy to change. Like this is why programmers keep rewriting stuff and thinking of new techniques, new programming language, and etc. Because the complexity we're dealing with is so high that it's difficult to manage it, right? And it's very easy to write something that's functional, just whip out a sketch that sort of works. But when you try to change anything, everything is so tangled together that you can't untangle it, right? That you can't. You'd have to start from scratch, and like this is why we as a team have been working so hard to improve the basics and the fundamentals and level up many levels in our skills, so that we are far better at writing code that's not just functional but is easy to refactor, and like that's exactly why. And I wasn't taking advantage of this in this instance, right? Because if the code was poor quality, then this iterative approach would also be agony. But
Right.
because it's good code, even if it's broken, but it's broken in different ways, but it's good code. It's just broken.
Yeah.
So iterating on it, refactoring it continuously, it's not very hard. And so that's worth taking advantage of. I guess the analogy, an imperfect analogy, but that's also why we talked not just about productivity, but about sort of organizing work in the whole team, and setting up an efficient system of working together in a company, right? Because if you have a very inefficient system, then it's very easy to change direction, to change ideas, because everything has to go through multiple people, have to approve of it. Many people, everybody is a stakeholder, everybody wants to change something, and it just getting to a solution and iterating on it is very hard. But when you set up a system that's very lightweight, where there's one person sort of responsible, and then like there's a feedback loop and all the things we talked about, and you also have the discipline not to push too far. So like you were iterating on your book and trying different things, but still not conceptually, but in the medium, but still in a sketch phase, right? Like it's very difficult to iterate when you try to make everything perfect. But in different ways, because then you have to redo all of the work. But when you keep things sort of dirty and unfinished and lightweight, then you can iterate on it. And so like first you need the system set up quite right, and then you can take advantage on it, working on very difficult problems that are very difficult to figure out on the first try.
Yeah, again, I would also add that, as I mentioned before, constraints help. So whenever I'm setting up constraints, like that's just like I said with the books, I had a finished number of books that I wanted to study, not all the books that we had or something, because we have lots of books downstairs. But I just chose this number of books. I'm going to study these books. They're different books. I'm going to study this. And it's the same with time that you give yourself for the big problem. So for example, for me, the 2-hour rule that I already wrote on my blog, this thing that to tackle this problem, I'm going to give myself 2 hours. And after these 2 hours, I have to go because I have something to do. So this constraint of having these 2 hours is very similar to the constraint of Pomodoro technique of having just, 25 minutes. Because what it does, it forces me to do now, to go now, to do something now. And very often in these 2 hours, I will have the problem almost done, almost solved, or almost started on, the thing that you were more scared of. This procrastination scary part will already, I'm going to be past that already. So I'm going to be in this nice phase of just developing the thing. Right. So the 2 hours constraint and having like at the end of these 2 hours something different has to happen, forces me to just do it, to stop procrastinating, to stop looking at the blank page, to start sketching something, to start doing something. So for me, like personally, these kind of constraints really force me and motivate me to do my best work because they're this motivation. Okay, it's enough now, Michael. You've procrastinated enough. Let's do it.
All right. So as for iPad only,
I
wanted to mention a few more things, but we have 5 minutes until you have to go.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to mention of an interesting consequence of the system that I set up, where I start with my first task, then I work on my main task, and then at 12:30, so at the half point of the day, I switch to shallow work. Other things that are not programming generally. And the interesting thing is that when I structure things like that, then at 12:30, I can step away from my computer and just take my iPad and go anywhere. Because I think about it, like my most important work is programming, and I cannot not reasonably code on an iPad, right? It's possible, but deeply impractical, like macros here. But I can do most other things. Like most importantly, I can generally do everything I need to do for code reviews, which is a big I don't want to say sink of time, but it takes up a lot of time to review other people's code for me, and it's an important thing I do. But I can do it on my iPad, right? I can do it on the iPad, and I can test whatever is built on my iPad and on my iPhone, right? I can write prose, I can design, I can plan, I can manage, I can communicate, talk to people when I have to talk something through, and I can do it all on the iPad. And by scheduling the day like this, I do my most important work until 12:30. Then I just check if there's something urgent, and if there's anything else in the shallow work that I can only do on my iPad, and if it's not there, I can leave. I can just take my iPad and go.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's really interesting because like there's a structure that allows me to work on my iPad in a more consistent way if I want it, if I feel like it. So for example, recently I was, semi-nomadic lifestyle. I was in a different city in Poland for a few days. I've done good programming work for the day, but I got tired. And it was a nice day. It was sunny, and it wasn't sunny for a couple of days. So I just took my iPad like in my hand and put the headphones on. I took a long walk to relax, to rest a little bit. And then I sat down on some random nice bench in the city. It was a warm day. And I done like good 2 or 3 hours of good work there, mostly writing prose. Like I mentioned 2 weeks ago, we were figuring out something hard that the aliens on this reunion helped us with, right? Mm-hmm. And I wanted to channel all of the thoughts I had on it into virtual paper so that we have a reference for discussing it with all the pros and cons of different solutions. And doing that on the iPad in a different environment than your normal office is a very good sort of use case for working on the iPad, because it's the sort of thing where like changing your environment like helps you change your mindset and be more creative with that sort of thing. And it's sort of nice to know I can do 3 out of 8 hours of work every day on my iPad.
Wow, man! Again, I would be happy to play this to you 2 years ago. You would tell me it was me. So, yeah, but that's again having this constraint that now you have the iPad and changing this dynamic of working somewhere else. It's fantastic, mm-hmm. And for me, it's amazing that you as a programmer can really figure out that you can do most of these other things on the iPad. Yeah. But again, it's thanks to the apps and thanks to the workflows and thanks to all these things that we cherish.
Yeah. Without spending a lot of time figuring things out and automating stuff, that wouldn't be possible. And I don't do that every day. I do it only some of the time, but I have the confidence that I can if I feel like it, if I feel like changing environment, if I'm sick of sitting in front of this screen, right? And I want to go outside or something.
Exactly. Like very often in my case, I'm again constrained. I prefer to do something on the iPad, even though I have this big iMac in front of me. So what I use the iMac for is like canvas of several things to put things there as a reference. But then I actually work on the iPad because I just feel better working on it, having the screen as an additional screen instead of the main workhorse.